job there is to, basically what we're doing is connecting small business owners with resources. So we have a couple of other economic development specialists besides myself, and that's what our job is to make connections. We have some lender relations specialists that do outreach with the lending community, and their job there is to make sure that all of the lenders are comfortable and able to use SBA's loan programs. We have a business opportunity specialist who specializes in contracting and helps small business owners utilize federal and actually state and local contracts to grow their businesses. We have a regional international trade manager who provides assistance to businesses that are looking to do exporting. And then finally, we have a district director and a public affairs specialist, and their job is really to make sure that people out in the community know what the SBA does. So that's a little bit of background about our district office. And for the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and shut off the video so you guys don't have to all look at me. You can look at the slides instead. So on the next slide, I'm going to give a little bit of background on the programs, and then I'll go into more detail after that. It comes as no surprise that right now we are handling a huge economic disruption because of the coronavirus outbreak. So as part of that, we've had 2 rounds now with regards to the CARES Act, and set up the 4 programs that you see listed there: the Paycheck Protection Program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance Program, the SBA Express Bridge Loan Program, and the SBA Debt Relief Program. What I will say is that across all 4 of those programs, there are some things that are in common. First of all, just know that you can have multiple SBA loans, but you can only have 1 PPP loan and 1 EIDL loan per business. So I know that there are folks that potentially have an existing SBA 7A or 504 loan, and they're still eligible to apply for a PPP loan or an EIDL. In addition, if you have other types of SBA disaster loans, you can apply for those programs as well. The other thing is that in order to apply and be eligible for an SBA loan, you do have to have either a Social Security number or an EIN number to be able to submit applications. So the first program I'm going to talk about here is the Paycheck Protection Program. This is a loan that is designed to provide direct incentives to small businesses to keep their workers on the payroll. And this is a guaranteed loan program administered by local lenders. Because this is a disaster program, faith-based organizations, which normally would not be eligible for SBA lending, are eligible to participate in this program. And agricultural enterprises have been added as an eligible entity as well. You do need to be in business or have been in business as of February 15th of 2020 to apply and be eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. So the loan itself is designed to cover up to 8 weeks of payroll, interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities. And payroll costs are going to include things like salary, wages, cash tips, vacation or sick leave, and any other benefits that you as an employer provide to your employees. This particular loan has a forgiveness piece in place, and the loan would be forgiven based on an employer maintaining or quickly rehiring their employees and maintaining those employees at a regular salary level. Keep in mind that the forgiveness portion of the Paycheck Protection Program would be reduced if full-time headcounts decline or if salaries and wages decrease. Also, if there was an economic injury disaster loan that's also received and used for the same payroll benefits, that economic injury disaster loan, or EIDL as we call it, would be rolled into the Paycheck Protection Program. And I'll talk about that a little bit on a future slide. So on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about some of the terms of the loan itself. So the loan can be for up to $10 million with a term on the not forgivable portion of 2 years at 1% interest. So if you end up with a portion of the loan not being forgiven, it would be deferred for 6 months, during which time interest will accrue. So you'll have 18 months to pay off the unforgiven portion of the loan. The bank that you're working with or the lender is going to be requiring some documentation from you to support your payroll costs and your expenses that can be utilized under this loan. So if you're using it for rent or interest on mortgage or utility expenses, they're going to want to see the documentation on those bills as well as documentation on your payroll. On an upfront basis, the loan itself is actually based on payroll, so the maximum amount of the loan is going to be based on the amount of payroll that you have. There are no fees or collateral or personal guarantees required for the loan. The lenders are being reimbursed the fees by SBA, so there's no fee that would be paid by the borrower to participate in the program. We do have a list of the Paycheck Protection Program lenders on our website with a link there. And the other thing that's on the website is a copy of the forms that both the borrower and the lender fill out. I always suggest that borrowers take a look at those documents so that you can see what your lender is looking for from you and potentially why they're asking some of the questions that they ask. Because as you can see, by and large, while they need some documentation on the payroll itself, a lot of the loan is based on certifications being made by the borrower. And the deadline for applying for this loan is going to be June 30th of 2020, or as funding runs out. And as we know, the first round of funding did run out, and right now lenders are operating on a second round of funding that was approved by Congress last week. So on the next slide, I do have an example of how the process works. So in this particular example, we're going to make a couple of assumptions. One of them is that there are employees who have wages in excess of $100,000, and that this particular borrower received an EIDL loan that was also used for the same payroll expenses. The $100,000 is important because that is the maximum amount of cash wages that can be considered for the Paycheck Protection Program. So for instance, if you have somebody that makes $115,000 in cash compensation, but then they have some benefits on top of that, the allowable amount for purposes of the loan is limited to the $100,000 of cash wages plus the amount of benefit. So when we talked about the non-cash benefits, this would be things like a defined benefit plan for retirement, if you're paying health insurance premiums, and then it would be the state and local taxes that get assessed on compensation of the employees. So in this particular example, we deducted out the excess wages over $100,000, and we came down to an annual expense of $1.2 million for payroll. What the formula then is that you average that out, so that's $100,000 a month, and then we multiply it back around by 2.5 to get to $250,000 as the maximum loan amount. But in this particular case, because there was also an EIDL loan of $10,000 that was used for the same payroll expenses, the maximum loan amount becomes $260,000. And then what happens is that the Paycheck Protection Program proceeds, $10,000 of that would be used to pay off the EIDL loan. And then what happens is the whole thing here, as long as it's 75% or more is used for payroll, this entire amount would be forgiven at the end of the 8-week period. The one piece of advice that I have for small business owners is actually two pieces of advice. Make sure that you're talking to your lender in advance to know what they are going to want to see for documentation at the end of the forgiveness period. When we talk about figuring out the maximum loan amount, it's going to ask you to provide a number, how many of employees you have. The employee count includes full-time equivalents. It includes part-time employees if you've got seasonal employees. So that is how you figure out how many employees you have for getting the loan itself, for the loan application. At the other end, when we talk about the forgiveness, the rules are based on full-time equivalents. SBA has not defined what a full-time equivalent looks like, so I have been recommending to any individuals or business owners that are applying for the loan to have that conversation in advance with your lender of what documentation they want to see at the end of that 8-week period to make sure that your business's loan is eligible for forgiveness. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the EIDL program. I'm going to go through this piece relatively quickly because the EIDL program was reallocated last week with the same allocation that came through for the Paycheck Protection Program. But what I will say is that the portal for the EIDL program has not reopened. And this program with the CARES Act actually became kind of 2 steps. There's one application, but there are 2 pieces to it. So you apply, there's a portal through which you apply for both an economic injury disaster loan advance and the economic injury loan. The advance is basically a grant of up to $10,000. The amount is based on the number of employees you have. So it's $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. So if you have 15 employees, you'd be limited to the $10,000. If you're a sole proprietor, it would be $1,000. That funding comes out first, and then what happens is the loan gets turned over, the loan application gets turned over to the disaster loan officers, who then are making a determination on the loan amount for the loan portion of this program. While the PPP program is more limited on the use of funds, this is really more of a working capital kind of loan. So as you can see, you can use it for material costs and pre-existing debt in addition to payroll and rent payments. The deadline for applying for this particular loan is December 31st, 2020, or again, as with the PPP program, you know, as it is going to be funding dependent. So on the next slide, I am going to talk a little bit about what the terms are and the eligibility piece. So this program as well is open to for-profit small businesses, basically of the same size, less than 500 employees. With the last round of appropriations, the program was opened to agricultural enterprises, which means basically farming and ranching operations. As well, this program is also open to nonprofit organizations. So this particular loan, the loan itself, and I don't have the terms listed here, but it's a loan of up to $2 million at 3.75% interest for up to 30 years. So the term on this one is a little different, much longer than on the PPP loan. The next couple of slides are going to cover kind of the screenshots as far as what the portal itself looks like. So there, on the first page, the first piece that you see there is the top of the page. So you're going to be asked to identify what kind of entity you are. And as you can see, there's a bar across the top there. It says disclosures, business information, the business owner information. Those are the next pages after this, and those pages you'll be filling in basically demographic information about yourself, your business. You have to fill out a couple of character questions, and on the next couple of pages, it will also ask you to provide the number of employees, your cost of goods sold, and your revenue, and that's going to form the basis of figuring out how much of a loan that you're going to be eligible for. So the next slide shows the bottom of that same page. And these 7 questions are some that you have to be able to check the boxes for to be considered eligible for the loan. And then at the bottom of the screen is the contact information for the disaster customer service. So if you have submitted an application and you have questions, those would be the folks that you would want to contact. What I will say about the EIDL program is that we don't have access to the application database here in the district office. So my team here has no way of looking up that information. So if anybody that's contacting us trying to figure out the status of their loan, if they haven't heard, we're going to give you that information for you to contact the disaster customer service folks. So on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about what happens after you do your submission. So this slide is, it's a screenshot of the email that goes out when the EIDL advance gets dispersed to a customer. And what happens is that the disbursement occurs. It shows up in your bank account as a deposit from the SBA Treasury, and then there's some numbers that come after that. But that's basically what it comes up. It's going to show up as a deposit for anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000. Shows up as SBA Treasury. And then what I've heard from business owners is that they've received an email that looks something similar to this, letting them know that the advance had been deposited. On the next screen, I've got a screenshot of the email that goes out once the loan has been turned over to a case manager in the disaster center. They're going to send an email out to you as the business owner to set up an account in the system, and that's how they'll communicate with you. If they need further information, if they need any documentation, this is the mechanism that they're going to use to contact you. In the case of a decline, my understanding is that you will get you'll get a mailed document that will give you a reason for the decline, and then it will also give you some information on how you can request reconsideration. I haven't seen that letter come out, but my understanding is that that is how they will communicate with you in the case of a decline occurring. So the next I want to talk about the Express Bridge Loan Program, and I covered this very quickly. It's a little bit narrow in that to be eligible for the Express Bridge Loan Program, you have to be a current customer of an SBA Express lender. And you can see we do have a link there to our website, and we have a list of the Express lenders on that page. So what I would say is that if you're interested in the program, if you take a look at that list and if you do have a relationship with the lender on there, you are welcome to contact them. Not all of the lenders are participating in the program, but it is an option. So this particular program follows the regular SBA Express terms and requirements. So as you can see there, the interest rate is prime plus 6.5%. There is a guarantee fee. Collateral is not required for this loan, but there is a personal guarantee required, and it can be used for working capital. So if you're looking for some more information on that, you can either go to our Express lender list and contact your lender, or I have a link to the SBA Express Bridge page there as well. And then the final program that we have available is the SBA Debt Relief program. And that program it's kind of twofold. It's open to current 504-7A and microloan borrowers. So if you are somebody that has one of those loans and you're not sure if your loan has been is being taken care of in this program, what you would want to do is reach out to your lender. This particular program is one where there are 6 months of payments being made by SBA. So this isn't 6 months of deferred payments. This is 6 months of payments actually being made by SBA, and we're covering the principal, interest, and fees on the loan. The program is also open to new 504-7A and microloans that are made between March 27th and September 26th. Now, for this particular program, because these are being done under the regular programs, we do have our regular size standard in place. So with our other disaster programs, the EIDL and the PPP, we considered small to be a business under 500. In this particular loan program, you do have to qualify based on size standards, so we do have a link to our size standard table there. And the specifics of this particular program are going to depend on which one of the programs you're either currently in or that you are looking to make a loan within. So, for instance, the microloan program, we use mission-specific lenders that are mission-specific organizations that have requested to be SBA microlenders, and they do loans up to $50,000. They have specific, interest rates and their terms and fees. They are going to differ a little bit from the 7A program, which is our regular guaranteed loan program, and then our 504 program is a program that can be utilized for purchases of real estate and capital equipment that has a term of more than 10 years. So on the next slide, I'm going to go, I may have already covered a little bit of the terms from the next slide, but the next slide is going to go into a little bit of detail there. So personal guarantees are required. The SBA is covering the principal, interest, and fees. And you can find a list of our regular guaranteed lenders on our website as well. So we're trying to make it easy to figure out who you should contact for purposes of participating in these programs. And the deadline for this program is September 26th. All right, so two of the things that SBA can provide to you are access to capital, and the other is kind of an access to knowledge. And our SBA resource partners are really kind of our access to knowledge. So what you see listed here are the regular SBA grant-funded resource partners. And they provide technical assistance and consulting and mentoring opportunities every day on a day-to-day basis. And in the course of working through this most recent disaster, they're providing extra assistance to small business owners to figure out kind of what those financial statements are that they need, and trying to understand what the lenders and what all this looks like. They're also working on trying to figure out how to help small business owners not only recover from the disaster, but how to become more resilient and potentially how to reinvent themselves. How do, moving forward, obviously at some point we're going to come on the other side of our disaster. So for some small business owners, it may be that they need to relook at and rethink about how they do things. And our SBA resource partners can really provide confidential, no-cost services to help small business owners do a deep dive on their business and figure out where the next steps are for them. So we have 9 small business development centers around the state of Minnesota. Locally here in the metro area, it's at the University of St. Thomas in downtown Minneapolis. Around the state, though, we cover pretty much every corner of the state. Everything from the Northland Foundation in Duluth, and in the south we have one at the South Central SBDC is at Minnesota State Mankato, and then in addition to some other ones. So we pretty much cover all corners of the state of Minnesota with our small business development centers. With SCORE, it's a group of volunteers that provide their expertise to small business owners, and they do a really great job of providing mentoring on a regular basis. So if you're looking for somebody that you can just talk to on a very regular basis about a very broad range of topics, SCORE is really great for that. If you visit their website and put your zip code in, you can get connected with a mentor in your local area. Our women's business centers, we have 3 women's business centers in the state of Minnesota. Women Venture is our women's business center here locally in the Twin Cities area. We also have a Women's Business Alliance in North in Duluth, and the Women's Business Alliance Central, which is in Little Falls. And both of our women's business centers are microlenders as well, but they do women-centric training and programming. And so really looking at some of the specifics of issues that maybe women-owned businesses are affected by more than others. So they're a really great resource. And then finally, we have a regional Veterans Business Outreach Center. So they're located in Wisconsin. But what I would say is that if we have any veterans or you know any veteran business owners, it's very helpful to have them connect with the VBOC, as the VBOC has access and knowledge of veteran resources that we may not know about. So finally, I shouldn't say finally, but the next thing we have, I like to, even though I'm not an expert on any of the state of Minnesota programs, we do like to talk a little bit about those. And the reason for that is I like to explain to most of our small business owners that there are resources up and down the governmental level. So the state of Minnesota's got programs available, and I know many of the cities and counties are starting to look at what kinds of gap funding they can provide as well. At the state of Minnesota, I understand that their their emergency loan program, I believe as of right now, is out of funding. I haven't heard the same from their loan guarantee program, but those are both programs that are open to small business owners in the state of Minnesota, and they're utilizing a number of different lenders around the state. So you're not applying via the deed for the programs, you're applying for some guaranteed lenders that are working with deed. They also have some good frequently asked questions for employers and business owners, as well as information on unemployment and health insurance resources. And the thing that I would say about unemployment, the unemployment insurance, is that program has changed over the last few days. I know that they posted some information. They created a pandemic unemployment assistance program. And so for anybody who potentially would not have previously been eligible for unemployment because they were an independent contractor or a self-employed or sole proprietor, take a look at the information that's out there because that was recently updated. And then there's also some specific health resources that are available. So the next slide, we've got listed just some information that is helpful from the coronavirus itself. And I believe as the businesses, as business owners, and we're starting to reopen and think about what does that look like and how do we protect our employees and our customers, you're going to find that the Department of Health, as well as the CDC and the World Health Organization, should have some resources available for you to help understand how that's going to look. How do you make sure that you can open in a manner that's going to be safe for everybody? So the next slide, unfortunately, speaks to something that I know the Better Business Bureau talks about a lot. Unfortunately, we've got scams and frauds, and it seems like every day we hear about something new that's happening in this arena. And so my advice to anybody that's getting emails is that before you click on any links, the biggest thing is just to make sure that you do the hover over the link and make sure that if it's something that says it's coming from SBA, it should be taking you back to a .gov email or a .gov website. And if it doesn't, what I would say is, first of all, don't click on the link. If you make a copy of what you have and contact us, I know our security people are interested to see what's happening so that they can make sure that they elevate this and try to make sure that they can shut down any fraudulent things that are going on around SBA specifically. Also know that we're not going to proactively call you and say, hey, you need to apply for this loan or that loan program. SBA doesn't, and there's just simply not enough of us to do that. So we're not going to proactively call you and say, hey, you should apply for this. So if you get that kind of a phone call, just be aware that it is not going to have come from SBA. So on the final slide, I do have some contact information for us here in the district office. And the first thing that I would say is that if you aren't already accessing our if you're not already accessing our newsletter, there's the link to sign up for it. It's sba.gov/updates, and there will be an opportunity for you to enter your zip code. If you do that, what you'll get access to is the SBA Minnesota District Office newsletter. And that's the vehicle that we're using to make sure that the general public is up to date on any changes that are occurring within our programs. We also have a Twitter handle as well, so we do send out some tweets. If you want to send questions to the district office, minneapolis.mn@sba.gov is our inbox. We also have our phone number there at 612-370-2324. I understand that our phone tree needs a little work, so most people are finding it's easier to send us an email. And what I would say about email is that our box is monitored at a minimum from 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening, but generally even later than that. So we are able to get answers out pretty quickly. Beneath that is again, the contact information for the disaster customer service email and phone number. So anybody that has submitted either an economic injury disaster loan application, if you have questions about the advance or the loan, that's going to be the venue from which you should be able to get some answers. And finally, a piece of advice. I would suggest that for all business owners, make sure that you are connecting with the state, with your city, with the county that you're in. I would say make sure that you stay connected with your chambers. They're the people on the ground that know what is being done at a more local level. And I know that up and down the chain, groups are trying to figure out, how can we put some funds together to provide a safety net for some business owners that maybe are not going to be covered by either SBA funding or by deed funding. So if you're connected at all levels, you'll have a better idea of what's coming open and what you can apply for and what's available to you. So before I actually open it up for questions, there's a couple of things that I did want to just mention that have come out relatively here recently around some of the new legislation. So as you know, the legislation that came out last week around the Paycheck Protection Program, one of the things that was done was that there was $310 billion that were set aside for the PPP program. And then within that, there was $30 billion that was set aside for what was considered medium-sized lending institutions and $30 billion that was set aside for smaller institutions. As of yesterday, there were about $50 billion of PPP lending that was done. And by and large, it was done by those smaller lenders. So what you're going to hear is that the $30 billion that was set aside for the small lending institutions has been used up. But just know that those small institutions still have access to lending dollars because they still have access to the $30 billion that was set aside for medium-sized and the $250 billion that was just generally set aside to be used for Paycheck Protection Program loans. So we are still doing lending. And if you haven't talked to a lender, I would say that, make sure that you do it as soon as you can. SBA here in the district office, we've been doing some training, and we've been training on the funding options. We've also been utilizing an FDIC program that was done with SBA a number of years ago called Money Smart for Small Business, which is it's a financial literacy program. So we used a couple of those modules, and we're doing some financial literacy training. And I guess what I would be interested to hear too is, as small business owners, if there are topics that you feel you would like to hear about, we would like to hear from you to see if that is some training that we can either put in place or if that we can do a better job of trying to find venues or find people that can do specific types of training. So we are very much on the lookout for, for those types of feedback as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over, and we'll go ahead and take some questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Twyla, for that comprehensive information. We do have questions that have been submitted, so we'll start with those. And then as you've been listening, participants, if you do have questions that you would like Twyla to address, please enter those into the Q&A feature on your taskbar, and we will get to as many questions as we can as time allows. So Twyla, let's start. We have a question, maybe just some clarity on the salary cap. So we're hearing that benefits are not included in the $100,000 cap and that the cap's on actual salary. So is there any kind of sense of what is that actual and when maybe these regulations might be put into writing so that there's a little more clarity around that?
So as far as the caps on the payroll, so the $100,000 cap is just on what's being defined as cash compensation. So wages, salaries, tips, commissions, that would be, so the cap there is $100,000. So if you have somebody whose salary that you pay them a wage of $115,000 a year, we have to cap that at $100,000 for purposes of determining the maximum loan amount. But what does get added back in there is that if you're providing benefits like sick leave or vacation, if you have some sort of a pension program or, defined benefit plan, those benefits then get added back in. So potentially it could be over $100,000. It's just that the cash piece is capped at $100,000. There is some fairly good, around the PPP program anyway, there's some fairly good clarity on the website. So if you go to, and I believe all you have to type in is sba.gov/PPP, and it will take you to the Paycheck Protection Program page. There's an FAQ on there that speaks to some of the questions around, around how this gets calculated. There's also specifically, because when we added the solo entrepreneurs and the independent contractors, there was a lot of question on what that looked like. So there is also a document out there on how they're computing the maximum loan amount. So there's two documents. Those two documents are definitely out on that page. If you're looking to see, there's some interim rules. So the way the government normally operates is we have a set of rules, and it's called the Standard Operating Procedure, or SOP for short. Because this program got put into place very quickly, there wasn't an opportunity to write an SOP. So what's happening is there's a number of interim rules that get published in the Federal Register. And so on that PPP page, there's also links to those interim rules out there. So for instance, if somebody contacts me in the district office and I'm going to provide some answers on some of these questions, I'm actually going to go out and I'll provide a link to the interim rule, and I'll tell somebody what page to look for and what particular paragraph they're going to find the answer to the question. But those links, they've done a pretty good job with the PPP page making those links available.
Very good. We have another question. What's your understanding of how to deal with getting both the EIDL advance or loan and PPP funds? Does it matter if one is received first or second? To be able to use the funds for working capital rather than wages, utilities, and rent? And that was a big question.
So, yeah, well, so I don't think it really makes any difference kind of what order you get them in. The advice that I've been giving to small business owners is to use them, make sure that you're using for different purposes. So the Paycheck Protection Program, that particular loan program is forgivable as long as 75% or more of the loan proceeds are used for payroll. And I understand that, for some businesses that haven't been able to open yet and they haven't been able to bring people back on, we get some questions about what does that look like. And the idea behind the program is that you as a business owner would be able to continue paying and be able to keep your employees on payroll and continue paying them throughout this, so that they weren't potentially going out there trying to find another job or, you know, moving on to another employer. So the idea is that over the course of the 8-week period, you're going to be paying your employees the same wages that you were paying them before. And so then at the end of the 8-week period, if you've utilized at least 75% for payroll, and the other 25% can be used for rent or utilities, and that could be, you know, internet, it's water, sewer, you know, electric, I guess the things that we normally consider to be utilities. And if 25% or less was used on that particular purpose, then the whole entire loan is going to be forgivable. The EIDL loan, on the other hand, has a broader base of use of proceeds. So you could use that for buying materials for your business, or paying on, let's say you had equipment that you're making payments on, or rent pay. You know, you can also use it for rent. You know, the difference is you can use it for mortgage payments, where the PPP, you can use it for interest on mortgage payments, but not mortgage payments themselves. So my advice to people is to utilize them for different purposes. But yeah, so the PPP is forgivable, but up to a certain point.
And just as a clarification, as we're talking about kind of what is part of that, for the PPP, are payroll taxes included in the amount that is forgivable?
Local and state payroll taxes, and I'd have to look at for sure. I believe it's the employee portion. I'm unfortunately not an accountant, but there's a piece of the federal taxes that's a little intricate. But I know the state and the state taxes, the local taxes are, there's an intricacy to the federal tax piece that if somebody wanted to send me a question specifically, I could point them in the direction to give them a good piece of information where they would see it in writing, what it looks like. But that is a question, I will say that is a question on the FAQ sheet that's on the PPP page, the website.
Okay, it looks like we're getting clarification from someone else who's done some of the research that says it's just state and local taxes, so not federal taxes. So, but that sounds like kind of what you were saying. People should look into that and make sure for their own situations. Let's see here. I think we covered, I think Twyla, you went over a lot of these during your presentation, but I just want to circle through a couple of questions we had just to make sure. If someone has a confirmation number, how do they check on the status of their application?
So if you want to check on the status of the application, it would be, and you've got the slide up there, so that's great. It's the 800. If you call the 800 number, the 800-659-2955. And when you get somebody on the phone and you ask if they're not able to answer the question, ask if they can send you to Tier 2. I've spoken to, we send people to that number all the time, and I've gotten some feedback, and some people, the feedback is that they're not able to get the answer, and I've talked to other people that they were like, yeah, they did get the answer, their question answered by the Tier 2 person. So call centers, you know, I don't think it's any surprise, but call centers have specific tiers. You know, people come in at the main level and they'll have, you know, general questions. And then if it needs to be amplified up, it goes to what's called Tier 2. And one of the gentlemen that had contacted me before said, yeah, he was able to get his question answered by the Tier, he called it the Tier 2 rep. So I guess I would say that if you do call that number, ask if you can talk to a Tier 2 rep and see if that person, if the first person you talk to can answer your question.
Excellent. We have a question here. Some of us on the call are curious if there's been any additional movement or discussion on including 501c6s in any of the recovery plans.
So I have not. That actually, I was on a couple of town halls, congressional town halls yesterday, and that came up as well. So I know that the congressional staff people are aware. I haven't seen any movement yet. I haven't seen any clarification. What I can say is that, you know, round 2 of funding looked a little bit different than round 1 of funding. So, you know, if there's more funding that ends up coming out, potentially, I would say that, you know, there are changes that could occur. If you are a 501c6, I would say, you know, continue talking to the policymakers.